From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know.
Hello, welcome back to the show. My name is Matt.
My name is Noel.
They call me Ben. We are joined, as always, with our super producer, Paul Mission Control Decant. Most importantly, you are you. You are here, and that makes this the stuff they don't want you to know. Paul, can we have some raucous applause? That's right, fellow conspiracy realists. The time has finally come. According to some, on June 25th, 2021, just a few days ago as we record this episode, the U.S. government released a document with the incredibly unappealing name Preliminary Assessment, Unidentified Aerial Phenomena. This is a...
Look.
Yeah.
I know it's a annoying title in that it's just so bleh. But
right.
think about what that means, you guys.
What it's actually saying. Yeah, it's saying Preliminary Assessment UFOs. It's a 9-page publicly available analysis that you can read right now. If you lived in the US, you paid for a small part of it. This looks at a lot of phenomena that was previously considered rumor, tall tales, internet BS. In short, it's the thing ufologists have dreamed of for decades and decades, something called disclosure. We have earlier episodes on this aplenty. We even have a limited series that we're releasing to focus on this topic. In today's episode, as well as in this mini-series, we ask just what exactly is in this report and whether, when it comes to UFOs, there's something the government still doesn't want you to know. Spoiler. The answer is yes. Here are the facts. First things first, this is new, but it's not really new.
Yeah. If read along, it's good light beach read if you wish, but it's not the first time in the United States that we've investigated unidentified flying objects, which are now referred to as the quite less sexy unidentified aerial phenomena, or UAP. The United States has investigated reports like this in the past with things like Project Blue Book, for example. Matt, I know that's one of your favorites, especially of the old video series.
Oh, for certain. Project Blue Book was a secret study that was being done. There was no congressional report. It wasn't even 20 pages. It wasn't one page. It was just it was a thing that was created behind closed doors. It was studying these very things, these unidentified aerial phenomena. The United States Air Force were the folks behind that one. It went from March of 1952 to December of 1969. So it had quite a nice little run there. But guess what? That also wasn't the first time they looked at UFOs.
Right. Yeah. So to be clear, Project Blue Book was some of the encounters that the public had with researchers for Project Blue Book doubtlessly lent credence to the legends of the Men in Black, because someone who is vaguely with the government really wants to follow up on that thing you said on the radio or that thing you told the local paper about, and then they're ghosts, they vanish. Maybe decades later, you learn about the small role you played in this.
Well, that's because you've been mind erased, right?
Well, the government at the time, I regret to say, their ability to erase things from consciousness hasn't reached sci-fi level yet. The best way to do it is through propaganda, wag the dog. They can erase things from public consciousness, but there are always individuals who get by until, something goes awry with them.
Right. It's just a matter of repeating the same story enough times where people just forget the true story.
Yeah. Indeed. And this
again, as far as we know, they don't have that tech.
As far as they know. So, right. As far as we know. So like you said, Matt, this was not the first investigation of its type. It came on the heels of two similar studies, Project Sign in 1948, and then its successor, Project Grudge in 1949. Funny story, Project Sign was initially called Project Saucer. all caps. But that might have been a little too on the nose for Uncle Sam, especially because they were trying to keep it under wraps.
Grudge is so aggressive, though. What's that about?
Well, dude, think about what happened in 1947. A little thing called Roswell. Huh?
Never heard of it. I don't know what you're talking about.
How cool is it? First of all, we talked about this on the show before, but how cool is it that there were official United States Air Force studies and, just government studies in general about UFOs right after the Roswell crash, alleged crash.
Right. An alleged weather balloon, or depending on who you ask. So, yeah, you're right. These two earlier investigations, Sign and Grudge, they're not as well known as Blue Book or this most recent UAP assessment, but they did establish an incredibly important precedent. The government decided that whatever the hell was going on in the sky, military intelligence had to investigate it, because we have to remember these are the days of the Cold War. Both the USA and the USSR are intensely concerned, terrified that their rivals might gain a technological edge, especially if it's one significant enough to decide the fate of human civilization overall. And this was not an invalid fear. This was very well-informed paranoia. But for us to understand this new report, we have to look a little bit further into the context of these existing things, right? Like this report is being called unprecedented in 2021. And in some ways it is, but it comes from this lineage of the sometimes contentious governmental military perspective on these inexplicable things. Like you can see some common assumptions as well as some conclusions. Blue Book did a lot more than the current report and the earlier two reports. They collected over 12,000 purported UFO sightings. And they did something a lot of these papers do, which is valid. They conclude the majority of these events can be chalked up to misunderstood natural phenomena or to misidentified aircraft. Maybe you just haven't seen a lot of planes, dude.
Isn't that largely where we're at with the current report? Or I don't mean to be spoilery.
No, actually.
Not quite.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
No. And the other thing here is that those 12,000 reports, one of the reasons there are so many is because they're collecting reports from everyone from a police officer that saw something to a bystander on a farm somewhere, in a city somewhere, who are not military personnel, and that is very different from what's being looked at in the current report, because those are military officials usually.
Fair enough. And so some, according to this report, there may have been some secret aircraft that might have played a role, and the U.S.'s own secret spy planes, the A-12 and the U-2, might have also been mistaken for UFOs. I mean, they're oddly shaped. They're very untraditional-looking aerial crafts, so that would make sense. But a grand total of 701 reports were classified as unexplained, with a few pretty notable caveats.
Yeah, the funny thing to me, the reason I think it's so odd about the U-2 and the A-12 is that the U.S. managed to scare the shit out of itself with its own things, which is, a positive statement for their operational security. But to those caveats you mentioned, Noel, they're very, very careful in Blue Book to say there is no evidence that these sightings we categorize as unidentified at present represent technological developments or principles beyond the range of modern scientific knowledge. That is going to be hugely important later on in the episode. There's also, they say, no evidence that any of these unidentified sightings were extraterrestrial vehicles. They went far enough in that report to that's one of the closest official documents that mentions the E word or the A word. Mm-hmm. And it's only there to dispel speculation.
Well, and they're being very careful with what they're saying. They're saying there is no evidence to conclude that, right? That these were extraterrestrials. So they weren't able to, it's not as though they're saying none of these were extraterrestrials. They're saying we have no evidence that would point to that. Right. And think about what that would mean. Like, how would you actually have evidence that one of these things is extraterrestrial craft? you would have to have like photographic imagery of something close enough to prove that, or what?
You'd have to have a chain of custody of some kind to prove the provenance of the craft that you're looking at and say
that's a good observation. You have to have extraordinary evidence to back up the extraordinary claims. So you would need something like a photograph of something that was clearly intelligent and non-human. Picture your favorite variety of alien, furry, scaly, gray, big-headed, we don't care, wearing a t-shirt that says Earth Girls Are Easy, why not? It's an okay film, but it doesn't hold up. And then they'd be standing next to the president at the time, holding a newspaper with the date the photograph was taken. You know, you'd need a lot of stuff.
Those were the furries, right? The furries were the aliens in question, and Earth Girls Are Easy, right?
Oh, and that movie didn't come out on Earth until like the 80s, so exactly. Or 80s, 90s.
Yeah, so it had been traveling through space for these many years before we got it.
You guys are having a lot of fun with this, but I'm being a little serious when I say you would need to have a photograph of a ship that showed writing or some kind of technology that you could prove wasn't generated on the Earth.
Correct.
I don't think. And how do you do that?
I don't think a photograph would do it. I think you
agree.
Need physical evidence of a mechanism.
Like a crash in 1947 in Roswell, New Mexico. Anyway.
Mm-hmm. Well, but if that were an alien crash, that would be helpful.
Well, it's what we think about in terms of like an alien autopsy type situation, or like really having, a physiological artifact from said crash that we can dissect and then, filter through science and then say, okay, this doesn't exist. We can compare this to like a mongoose or whatever. And we do not have anything that represents this particular species or, DNA strain or whatever. Again, I'm not a scientist, but.
Yeah, we're all agreeing with the same thing, I think, which is you would need to have physical evidence of some sort. One other thing that could be tremendously useful that sci-fi authors speculate on occasionally would be elements that do not exist on our current periodic table. The most profound of those would be elements that are known as, it's a hypothetical thing. No one's proven it yet, but there's this possibility people have speculated about that says there's an expanded periodic table, right? If we knew everything in the universe, there would be an expanded periodic table. The vast majority of those heavier things are unstable elements, right? They exist for a very short amount of time, but there may be what's described as an island of stability where there are elements we would not recognize that are super, super dense, but they're somehow not instantly just exploding again. They would be around for, maybe days or so. That would be proof.
Yeah. Isn't that something along the lines of what we have in the work of our buddy Jeremy Kenyon Lockyer Corbell, who did a film called Patient 17. And there was an issue in that was addressed about a gentleman that claimed to have been abducted or contacted in some way by extraterrestrials and had some sort of embedded piece of shrapnel in his body that was supposedly, according to the film and the reporting, some unidentified element.
Right, but again, as we always have to say when we talk about this sort of stuff, unidentified doesn't mean unprecedented, unfortunately, But yeah, do check out that documentary. Would love to hear your thoughts on it, folks. As the years wound on since the Blue Book days, more and more, and since it was declassified, more and more people embellished this tale, or they claimed it was a red herring to distract folks from any number of alleged unproven conspiracies, such as the wonderful story of MJ-12, the Majestic 12, the purported secret organization of scientists, tycoons, and top minds who met with the president, learned aliens were real, and tried to figure out how to deal with that in secret. That is such a cool story. I love it.
Yeah.
I love that one. But so it seemed like consigned to history books, right? An anomaly, a good History Channel special every so often. But something must have changed. Blue Book, Sign, and Grudge didn't stop because reports stopped. They stopped for other reasons, like the inability to find hard proof for the detractors, or the lack of further information or analysis, they all ended up kind of shrugging their shoulders at the end. But then in 2007, the government resumed investigating UFOs through the formation of some, just folks, heads up, there are going to be a lot of acronyms here. We're sorry, that's government writing, not us. The formation of something called the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, or ATIP.
TIP. It almost sounds like the AARP or something. It's not a couple letters off from that.
It's kind of like that. A little bit. I'm just joking.
Well, I mean, it's got
consider
the AA.
who's involved.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, exactly. Created by then Senate Majority Leader, Harry Reid, and he had some help from some other colleagues, Senator Ted Stevens and Daniel Inouye.
This is interesting because the two-party system was still pretty divided at this time, obviously, perhaps not as much as it is in the current day, but this was a bipartisan initiative. There were people on both sides of the aisle who probably didn't agree with each other about much of anything, but they did say, okay, let's figure out what's going on. And we've got a neat little retrospective clip here from Harry himself, Matt, that you found.
When I started talking about this years ago, people made fun of me, and even my own staff thought I was crazy in talking about it. But in hindsight, I'm glad I did.
He's saying pretty explicitly that he encountered some stigma for his interest, and stigma will also become important in Act 3 of today's episode. So,
and just to point out, it's because since 1969, from that point up until 2007, it was very much treated like this is a sci-fi concept. Mm-hmm. This is fiction. There's no reason to put any kind of time or money into this whole thing with unidentified aerial phenomena or UFOs or whatever you want to call it. ETs aren't real. Let's just move on. From 69 to 2007, and then a group of senators who represent us, who we vote for, went in and they did it, man. Well, that's pretty cool.
They also did it because a great deal of Congress is run by a private financial interest.
What?
Yeah, there's a billionaire.
That's not true.
A billionaire you're familiar with if you've been in the world of ufology, named Robert Bigelow, and he's the one who put the hard sell on Reid to do. Are
you talking about Robert Bigelow, male billionaire? Hello.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and UFO enthusiast.
I'm sorry.
This group, the formation of this group, plants a seed, and that seed later grows into the strange report that just came out a few days ago. Interesting note, you've probably seen interviews with people like Luis Elizondo and so on, and he was running this for quite a while, and he is, to his credit, he's pretty transparent about what he did, what the program did, and where he thinks things could be improved or what lessons were learned. But this program was not really, it wasn't classified, because Elizondo can freely talk about it, but it had zero publicity and it operated in obscurity until 2012, officially.
Elizondo is such a fascinating dude. Can I just take a second to apologize for my Deuce Bigelow reference? That was inappropriate, and I offer my humble mea culpa for that one.
Are you apologizing to Deuce? Or
Yeah.
I'm apologizing to the listeners and to both you and Matt and super producer Paul, Mission Control Decant.
Well,
okay.
I mean, Rob Schneider is a pretty approachable guy. I think.
You think so?
I think he'll be fine. Yeah.
But what if he's in animal mode? What if he's like, thinks he's a cheetah or something? I wouldn't want to approach that.
Just let him get it out of his system, and then
fair.
And then de-escalate and have a conversation. But keep us in the loop on this, Noel. We got your back.
So in 2012, information started to come to light. I remember how excited we were when we're starting to hear whisperings about this. But again, it wasn't until 5 years later, I think, December 2017, that's when the DoD, the Department of Defense, came forward and said, yes, there is a thing. as part of a defense program that collects data on these UFO sightings by military personnel. And despite the fact that we got rid of this thing that Harry Reid started back in the day.
Tip.
Yes. We're still looking into this thing. We're still interested in it. And that's what led to this thing called this group called the Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force, or the...
Yes.
Ooh, that's. Are you the
Red
man
Lodge
from
guy?
the dream?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And the UAP...
That gum you like is coming back in style, Ben.
They're the folks that made this report.
This is the context from which this report sprang. And so when we look at the newest release, it is crucial that we do not look at it as a single paper. And I'm playing a little bit of a trick on us here. But instead look at it as a new chapter in a very, very long story. And with all that in mind, it is time to ask, what's in this report? We'll tell you after a word from our sponsor.